Hey guys, how's it going? Laura with Garden Answer. Today I want to give you 9 tips to help you take care of your Christmas cactus. Now there is some confusion between a Thanksgiving cactus, Christmas cactus, holiday cactus, and Easter cactus. There are differences and I will go over those at the end of the video, but the care for all of them is essentially the same. So let's just jump right into the tips. So tip number 1 is to provide them with lots of bright natural light. You don't want to put them though in a spot that gets direct sun because that can bleach out and burn their foliage. They can also handle lower light situations, but they bloom much better with more light. Tip number 2 is to check them weekly for water. This type of cactus is very different than the desert type of cactus that you might be used to taking care of. They're actually a type of epiphytic cactus, which means in nature they grow attached to other plants and rocks, not in soil, which means their roots need to be able to breathe. You'll want to water them thoroughly, allowing the water to drain out and away from the pot. They do not tolerate wet feet, so if you have your cactus sitting in a saucer and any water collects in that saucer, you'll want to make sure to pour it out. How often you water your cactus will depend on where you have it, so what the temperatures are, what size of pot it's in, and what time of year it is. Typically indoors, you're going to be watering about every 1 to 3 weeks depending on those factors. I just make it a habit to check mine about once a week. Best thing is just to allow the soil to dry between waterings. So if you live in a more humid climate, you'll be watering probably a little less. If you live in a dry climate, you'll be watering a little more. Tip number 3 is to plant them in a cactus soil mix. So their roots need to breathe. So using a really porous, fast draining mix like a cactus soil is really essential to the health of the plant. But as a side note here, Christmas cactus actually perform better, bloom better when they're pot bound. So you typically don't need to repot them but every 2 to 3 years. When you decide that it's time to repot, you just want to make sure to do it about a couple months after their bloom cycle, so that usually means spring or early summer. Tip number 4 is that Christmas cactus like the same temperatures we like, which usually means a range between about 65 to 75 degrees with slightly cooler temperatures at night. Now in order for them to set and maintain their flower buds, they do need quite a bit cooler temperatures, but I'll talk about that in a second. These are also not a hardy cactus, so if you have yours outside in the summertime, you do need to make sure to bring them indoors before it freezes. Tip number 5 is to maintain a higher level of humidity around your cactus. So if you live in a humid area, you're probably fine. If you live in a dry climate like I do, you do have to kind of create false humidity. You can do this by putting your Christmas cactus on top of a saucer filled with pebbles and water, just making sure that the bottom of that pot is up out of the water. But what will happen is the water will evaporate and it'll create a nice humid environment right around your cactus. Tip number 6, don't skip fertilizing. Christmas cactus don't need a ton of fertilizer, but it does help them put on a lot of nice new growth during their normal growing season. So what I like to do is wait until I see new growth appear in the spring, and then I'll start fertilizing once a month through about midsummer. That's all they need. You don't want to be fertilizing right before or during their bloom cycle, which usually means late summer through the winter months. Tip number 7 is to give your cactus a hand to help it set new buds and bloom. In order for your cactus to bloom, it needs longer periods of darkness, reduced temperatures, and less moisture. You'll usually want to start this process about 6 to 8 weeks before you want it to start to bloom, which usually means late September to October. You want to put them in a spot that gets complete darkness for 12 to 14 hours and temperatures ranging from about 50 to 55 degrees. The rest of the time, the rest of the 10 to 12 hours, they can be out in the light and temperatures ranging from about 50 to 65 degrees. Now I know that seems like a huge pain, so you want to just try to position your plant that is in a spot that naturally gets more darkness, that won't be interrupted by yard lights or car lights, that sort of thing. And if you can't give them the cooler temperatures that they need, just give them longer periods of darkness and that will help kick them into bloom. Once buds begin to appear, you can bring your cactus back out to the place where you want to display them and resume a normal care routine. And as long as there's adequate light and somewhat cooler nighttime temperatures, the flowers should develop normally. But be careful about any drastic change in light or temperature or humidity because that can cause bud drop. And what that means is the buds will just simply fall off the plant and will not bloom. It's a common problem and it's usually just because there's a drastic change in their environment. So if that is the case, if you're bringing them out of this cool kind of dark area and you've got them in a really warm, bright spot, you'll want to slowly acclimate your plant back out to that area. Tip number 8 is to prune yearly if needed. If your plant is a nice, beautiful shape, you don't need to worry about this, but if you've got an unruly or gangly looking plant, pruning it back can really help it branch out a lot better. It's really easy to do. You just simply cut between 2 leaf segments. It's very easy to identify. And if you've got a super out of control plant, you can actually take your whole Christmas cactus down by about 1/3 every single year without causing any damage. Now with these pieces that you've cut off, you can actually easily propagate them as well. So you want to let them set out for a few days, let those cut ends heal and callus over, and then put them back down in cactus soil mix about 1/2 inch buried in that soil. Keep them lightly moist, and in about 2 weeks they'll have new roots. Tip number 9 is to keep an eye out for stress, disease, and insects. So let me go over these real quick. Overwatering is probably the main stressor to Christmas cactus, and it can cause a host of different issues, mainly root and stem rot. So you might notice the foliage of your plant start to shrivel and kind of go limp, and then the whole plant will wilt down dramatically, or you'll see whole branches rotting and breaking off at the base. And also, if you keep that soil too wet, it can attract fungus gnats. So the best course of action to avoid all of these problems is to just, number one, not overwater in the first place, to allow that soil to dry out between waterings, and then also to consider putting your cactus in a breathable terracotta clay pot rather than keeping it in its plastic nursery pot. If you notice any of these problems starting, the best thing to do is remove the cactus from its pot. Try to remove as much soil as you can from around its roots. If there are any rotten looking roots, you can take those out and then repot it in fresh, sterile cactus mix. Thankfully, this type of cacti isn't really prone to insect problems, but if you notice a problem arising, best thing to do is take a picture, take it down to your local garden center, and they can help you out finding the right insecticide for the type of insect that you have. So overwatering is the biggest problem, but on the other hand, if you notice your cactus kind of starting to take on a reddish hue, that either means that it's in too much sun or it's not getting enough water, and those are easy things to adjust. So basically, it's just a good idea to keep your eye out on your plants so that if you see any of these types of problems starting, you can head them off before they become a major issue. So those are my 9 tips. Now, in the beginning of the video, I said I would go over the differences between the different type of cacti. You may have heard them referred to as Thanksgiving cactus or Christmas cactus or holiday cactus, which encompasses both of those two, or Easter cactus. So there are some slight differences. So the Thanksgiving cactus and Christmas cactus are actually part of the same family of plants, but they bloom at slightly different times. So Thanksgiving cactus have pointier leaves, and they bloom usually November into December, and then your Christmas cactus have more rounded scalloped leaves, and they bloom December into January. The Easter cactus actually belongs to a completely different plant group, even though it looks really similar, and they bloom in the spring right around Easter time, and they have more scalloped leaves as well. All 3 of these are tropical epiphytic cactus native to the rainforests of Central and South America. So they're very different, like I said, than the desert type of cactus that you and I are probably most used to taking care of, because they're found in nature attached to trees and rocks. They're not growing in soil. They're not parasitic, though. They don't draw nutrients or take nutrients from wherever they're attached. They'll naturally attach themselves to the crotch of trees or hollows of rocks or anywhere where natural debris will collect and decompose. And that type of medium, that loose medium, is perfect because the moisture can come in and go away really quickly, leaving their roots really able to breathe nicely. Around this time of year, most of what you're finding at your local garden centers or the grocery store is your actual Thanksgiving cactus, because they're much easier to ship and handle than Christmas cactus because they tend to be a lot leggier. But all of this to say, all 3 types of cactus require basically the same amount of care. It's just a difference of when you are forcing them into their bloom cycle. So that's it, you guys. I hope this video is helpful. If it was, leave a like down below, and we will see you in the next video. Bye.